Welcome back. You're watching Today. Now, Fred Hume, Managing Director of the Hume International, is urging for a comprehensive plan to mitigate against some of the impact of the avian flu that we have seen ravage part of the poultry industry. You have seen that companies like Astral Foods have warned against the shortage of poultry products in the country because of this and other factors. He joins us this afternoon for a little bit more on this. Fred, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps you could start by giving us a sense of how bad the implications of this bird flu have been and are likely to get.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to share our side of the story. We firmly believe that the worst of this bird flu outbreak has not been seen yet. Worse is unfortunately to come, and we expect to see, shall I say, the eye of the storm come late November. To date, millions of birds have been culled, and this is unfortunately just one of the contributing factors to the dismal performance of the domestic poultry producers. They're also unfortunately hindered by a severe bout of load shedding, and like much of the South African manufacturing industry, struggling to, shall I say, pass those costs on. And unfortunately, we firmly believe that higher prices will be the net result of this bird flu outbreak. And the only way that you can mitigate that, and hopefully it's still in time enough before Christmas, is by re-looking the poultry master plan and possibly suspending some of the anti-dumping duties that have recently been imposed, possibly considering imposing a quota system on the importation of bone-in chicken, along the same lines as the quota system that's applicable to imports of bone-in chicken from the USA.
Now, you say that we are approaching the eye of the storm, and you talk about higher prices and the suspension of the anti-dumping duties. Would this really just create that mitigation that you talk about, in that consumers, which are, by the way, already struggling, would be able to then continue to access a staple that they can afford, as opposed to other kinds of meat that have become unaffordable to them? I suppose here what I'm trying to ask is, to what extent will we see this mitigation actually assist the consumer, but also to alleviate pressure on the industry?
Okay, well, please, do accept that we are an interested party. We are, of course, importers of frozen chicken. So, shall I say, we're not impartial here, but certainly we've always felt that there's room for domestic production as well as imports. Imports are essential, in any well-functioning supply chain. From time to time, you are going to see outbreaks of animal disease. Unfortunately, bird flu is endemic in every poultry flock around the world. This is entirely predictable. We accepted that this would happen, and it was going to happen again this year. Possibly the severity of this was possibly, not visible to all of us. But unfortunately, in this case now, because imports can't fill that supply gap left by, shall I say, the domestic production failure, not as a result of their own doing, unfortunately, but simply because they've been hit by animal disease, as poultry flocks are around the world. Us as importers now can't rush to fill that supply gap, which would have then kept prices relatively stable and shelves well stocked.
One of the issues that has been argued around the dumping of chicken or importing of chicken into the country is that it does hamper the local producers. And one wonders, with the importers and local producers working together, and I know you say that you are impartial because you are an importer, but is there room for both local and importers to be able to work together as a sustainable way going forward? Things like the load shedding, extreme weather conditions and bird diseases are not something that are going to be completely alleviated, and I suppose it's a cycle that will continue for a time to come. So a sustainable working condition to be created between the two suppliers, is that something that could be considered?
I certainly believe that's possible. There's no doubt about that. it does not make sense putting all your eggs in one basket. Anything's possible, as we've seen, and unfortunately in this case, there aren't even eggs around to get egg on your face, and the guys that drafted this poultry master plan have to question, the sanity of the way they went about this. I mean, in essence, you literally have decided, to block off, shall I say, one part of this well-functioning supply chain. Importation of chicken serves, shall I say, uh, it coexists with domestic production in the sense that it supplies, shall I say, cuts that are not produced in the right quantities in this country. It acts as a price regulator, keeping prices in check. It fills the void at times when domestic production, as we said, fails because of animal disease or, higher input costs as a result of load shedding or higher feed prices or whatever the case may be. So certainly we respect ITAC's, shall I say, the job they do. I mean, the fact that they stand, shall I say, then to protect domestic producers from unfair global competition. Certainly, we respect all of that. We're just saying that it doesn't make sense to put all your eggs in one basket, limit your options only to domestic production. Unfortunately, in a case like that, it's only the consumer that loses at the end of the day. The domestic producers, they of course face higher costs as a result of load shedding. They are going to incur losses as a result of bird flu, but they're going to make this up with higher prices at the till. And who's going to pay for that? It has to be the consumer, unfortunately. And if we had a quota system in place, if we were, shall I say, more circumspect about the way we looked at this, and we understood that, that food security can't stand on one leg, we require imports to shore that up, then we could have mitigated, shall I say, these costs. And unfortunately, in this case, first time ever, importers are basically, putting the ring with one arm tied behind their back. There's no ways we can fill this gap, importing only from Brazil and a little bit from Ireland. So South Africa even needs to go further. I mean, many countries have been declared free of bird flu. These are important producers of chicken, long-standing trading partners of South Africa. These markets need to be reopened urgently.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time, Fred. And I suppose it's a conversation that we'll continue to have as we see to government and the measures that they put in place to protect consumers from higher poultry prices based on the disease, as we've just spoken about, but also other issues around the load shedding and, of course, the higher input costs that the industry is currently facing.